Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are today. My name is Stefan, and I am MyGuru's Director for Tutoring. And today we're going to be discussing some best practices for studying GRE vocab. It's now 9:30 Central Time in the United States. I'm going to pause the recording for a moment to allow more people to arrive, and we'll get started in about 5 minutes. All right, it is now about 9:35 Central Time. We'll go ahead and begin today's discussion about just best practices for GRE vocabulary study for this standardized test. So, just to begin, we'll simply start by talking about what you can expect in terms of the amount of vocabulary that will be involved in the exam and how frequently you need to study. So the GRE verbal section overview, basically you're looking at about 50% vocabulary and about 50% reading comprehension as far as the topics covered in that section of the test. So you can already see vocabulary has a relatively high importance on this exam. And of course, just improving your vocabulary will help with the reading comprehension as well as your essay ultimately on this exam as well. So there are plenty of reasons to set up a good study plan for vocabulary. And your general vocabulary recommendation. Hey there. I generally recommend daily study of 15 plus words. And when you're doing your study of the GRE vocabulary, what I usually recommend is in the morning, you want to study those new words. In the afternoon, you want to review that day's words, new words. Evening, you want to review what we'll call all active words. So basically, you're going to go through some, let's be realistic, 5 to 100 words ideally every week. So your weekly review of your vocabulary, basically once a week, you'll want to review all active words, and you'll want to retire a word that retire active words that you are certain of once a week. So if you go through and you're like, you know what, I know what pescatarian means, I know it inside and out, I don't have to worry about it, retire it so that you're not going to use that in your active word. You'll end up with either a web app or a computer app or phone app or just a stack of vocabulary cards that is quite onerous ultimately. So you'll just want to retire those active words so that you can make it so that you're basically not worried about having everything set up constantly. So then your monthly view is going to involve there it goes. I'm sharing my screen still. Okay, it's just kind of buried underneath my my full screen here. So the review is just going to be to review all completed words to that point. Attention. So that means anything that's active, anything that you've gone through the vocabulary review, you want to confirm that you've retained it, basically. So that's going to be your standard rigor that would be recommended for vocabulary review, and you can just kind of have this as a good guideline of how to do it. And so first, and let me put it in the chat box, any questions about the general rigor recommendation? Start. So if you would like, if you have any questions, you can answer them over the audio, or you can reply in the chat box. So then let's talk about what the actual content requirements are going to be for your vocabulary review. So your vocabulary review content. So unfortunately, it is going to be impossible to learn every word in English over the course of your GRE vocab review. It's just too big of a language. So instead, we want to make sure that our flashcards or preferred web app is going to have the proper information that can help you deduce what a good guess might be for a word that you're unfamiliar with based on the parts of the word that make it up. Because basically, English in a lot of ways functions as like almost a grammatical, lexicographical, uh, and cognitive set of Legos. You just have different parts of words that mean things consistently. So the first thing that you have to have in your flashcards or preferred web app, of course, is going to be a definition. And you want to be clear, concise, and include secondary definitions if required. So, for instance, the term flag. So, a flag could be the noun meaning a banner, right? Like an actual flag of, say, Portugal. So, that would just be one definition of flag. Or if you have flag as a verb, that could be something like either to hail or signal, like I'm going to flag a taxi. Or you could even have something like flag that is going to be a secondary verb, which means to lessen. As in, if my energy were to flag, that means that my energy is going down. So there are a bunch of different possible definitions, especially for common terms. And this also actually just kind of gets to your rigor and general recommendations of your study. So I'll put this kind of over here to the right, is that you want to always prioritize words you kind of know. And question mark words from your practice drills or exams immediately for vocabulary review, for addition, basically, to that vocabulary review. Because the words that you've seen before but aren't 100%, those are going to be the most damaging ones to you as you work through your vocabulary section of the GRE. If you don't have any idea what a word means, that could still be selected by you because you just know, I don't know what abecedarian means, so I'm just going to say it's possible that that's the right answer. However, if you look at, say, the word hermitage and you go, oh, hermitage, well, I see the word hermit in there, and I'm just going to assume that's where hermits live, you've actually gotten it wrong because you don't know the definition. You're just breaking apart the term incorrectly. So you always want to prioritize words you kind of know and words that you've seen from practice drills, because you're just simply going to never be as interested in trying to figure out what a word means as when it just cost you a correct answer. So if you're going through a practice exam and you're like, I don't know what pescatarian means, let's add that to the list immediately. And another just general piece of advice is to randomize the review. Don't alphabetize. Just because it becomes too much of a drag, for lack of a better term, if you're alphabetizing, and it just becomes very um, like kind of dreadfully dull if you're going, well, a bet, and then we go to a board, and then we go to and then we go to a dwat, and you're like, okay, I've lost the A's by the time I get to the G's. So randomize, focus on things that you kind of know, get words from practice drills or exams immediately into that review, and that'll help make it more of an active learning endeavor, as much as just memorizing vocabulary can be. So that first bit for the flashcards is going to be the definition, right? So we need to have a clear and concise definition and have secondary definitions if it's necessary. Then, that step 2 on the review content is that you have to make sure you include synonyms, because it's always better to have synonyms to refer back to rather than sentences. So depending on where you're from and what your experience has been with your English instruction when you were a child, or when you were an adolescent or teenager, or even potentially as an adult, you may have been instructed to use vocabulary sentences. And it's going to be difficult to use sentences, because if I just said something like Sheila was profligate in her spending, well, if we know that we're trying to figure out the term profligate here, that doesn't give me any context. If I just remember that Sheila was profligate in her spending, it tells me that profligate can refer to spending, but we don't know how. So basically, we're looking at it as it could be lots, it could be little, it could be often, it could be rarely. We have no idea what profligate would mean just based on the sentence. Whereas if instead we say profligate is basically synonymous or equal to, say, wasteful, we know exactly what's happening with that term. You go, okay, profligate means wasteful, whether we're talking about spending, whether we're talking about um, any other type of context for the term. So synonyms are going to be better than sentences every time when you're creating your flashcard using your web app. And then lastly is going to be your roots and affixes. So the way roots and affixes work are the part of speech that will basically tell consistently. This is how it worked in, say, Greek or Roman frequently. So, for instance, if we see the term atypical, so if we see the word atypical, we can basically break that down into a plus typical. Pardon me. So we have to know, what does the root or the prefix a mean? So can anyone share what the prefix a means in English? Give folks a moment, see if anybody knows what prefix a means. Well, don't want to put anybody too much on the spot, but a basically means not. So we know that if we see the word atypical, we're looking at not typical. So these are the 3 parts that you're going to want to in all of your vocabulary flashcards, or potentially a web app. Now, as far as web apps go, so possible vocab resources. So there's a whole bunch of different things that are out there. Obviously, flashcards. I prefer um, personally self creation, but pre created flashcards are okay if they include or can be altered to include those three pieces that we talked about of the definition, synonyms, slash affixes. Now, so there's a whole bunch of resources that are out there. You've got Princeton Review, you've got Manhattan, you've got Barron's, and literally any vocabulary resource is going to be viable. And that again gets back to just that nature of the GRE. All words in English are viable, and therefore there's no wrong place to do your study for the vocabulary on the GRE. So pick a pick a pick a resource for flashcards, and that'll be fine. Now, if you're talking about phone apps, I will be the first to admit that the technology goes faster than my familiarity with it. So these are just some that I'm familiar with from past students. I basically look at my phone as something that annoys me greatly, and I wish it would stop buzzing all the time. So I've been told that Brainscape flashcards are good. I've also been told that the Galvanize vocab builder, and this is just for test prep generally. I believe it's not necessarily only for the GRE, but if it's other TOEFL or ACT, SAT kind of things, as well as just everybody's favorite, the Magoosh vocabulary. And to do this work, you just have to find the time to fit it in regularly. So when we were talking about, and I'll just zoom out of here, for the vast majority of everything here at this point, is make sure that you're doing that daily study regularly with constant repetition, because that's going to be the main way that you improve your score. There's no shortcuts as it pertains to the vocabulary. So you have to make sure that you're just putting in the time. And while again, there will be instances where just like, I've never seen, frangible before in my life. What is frangible? The better you can do to identify those roots and affixes, identify synonyms, break down words, that's going to help you. And when you're actually in the exam, you have to just be honest with yourself about whether. So those are really the main kind of takeaways. The vocabulary stuff, it's pretty straightforward, provided that you put in the effort and time needed to just build it out. So at this point, I'll just open it up. Are there any questions about the vocabulary, GRE vocabulary study recommendations here? And you can either ask over the phone, or you can ask in the chat box. Well, I hope that everybody enjoyed this brief session on vocabulary study best practices, GRE. If there are any questions down the line, please email me at snier@myguruedge.com. Oops, I lost an M there. And we will continue with these weekly lessons on just the GRE here through, I believe, October at the minimum. So if there's another topic, stop the website, see what's coming up, and we might be able to show you some more tips here in the coming months. Thanks for joining, everyone, and have a great day.